Oh yeah, what's going on, GameLeapers? This is Iggs, and in today's video, 10 most underrated champions for patch 12.18. So these champs hopefully won't be as banned and picked as much as the most broken champs next patch, but they'll still give you an amazing chance to win your games. And for all of these champions, because some of them, well, are kind of like not played as much as they should be, I'll give you the rune pages, the builds, the summoner spells, the skill order that you need to run on these champs so you can hit the ground running when you actually pick them. And to master any of these champions, guys, I'd highly recommend checking out our website in the description comment section, GameLeap.com, because our challenge of players and coaches that we have around the world upload daily content for our subscribers. So to get exclusive access to our library of content, get signed up, and without further ado, let's get into the countdown. Now we're going to start with 3 to 4 top laners, and the first of these, this is Graves, who I've mentioned before in our underrated series, because Graves in the top lane, well, most of the time you're going to see Graves in the jungle. But Graves in the top lane, if you cast your minds back to last year's Worlds, he was picked an awful lot. And I still think at the moment the champion is very hard to beat in the top lane, and he's an excellent blind pick. There are very few champions that actually do well against Graves, so with this rune page here, running fleet footwork with footwear and biscuit delivery, you have so much sustain during the laning phase. And think about those buffs last patch to Graves. So your Q's cooldown, your end of the line cooldown is 7 seconds at level 9 when you've got 5 points in it, and your ultimate's base damage went up as well. Now when you are playing Graves top lane, you can go Eclipse, like it's recommended here, but you can also go Gore Drinker. So if the enemy team has a lot of close range champions that will be jumping on your head, Gore Drinker is going to keep you alive for longer, and also the ability haste is really nice as well. You can use your quick draw, your dash, an awful lot in the late game because of all that ability haste. So Graves in the top lane is the first champion to consider to pick for 12-18. Now following Graves, we've got a champion who does so well into lots of melee champions in the top lane, this being Lillia. And I know that Lillia is kind of well known at the moment, but to be honest, she still is not played as much. So the champions you want to be picking Lillia into are really those close range champions, especially those champions with attack speed. Because Lillia, you can go something like Leandry's and then into Frozen Heart, because Frozen Heart is so cheap now, and the amount of ability haste, the amount of mana and armor it gives you, and of course the attack speed slow, which is really what you're buying it for, it's such a nice item on her. Also because of her low cooldown on her blooming blows, her Q at level 9 it actually makes her really hard to duel. She'll have a lot of DPS and consistent damage, and when you're running Conqueror, it's very hard to actually kill a Lillia. But you can see that in Master and above, she's only picked in 0.5% of games, so that's 1 in 200 games. It's really not as much as it should be, and for a champion to have close to a 52% win rate against very good players, it's certainly a good shout to pick her. But again, I just recommend picking her as a counter pick. Blind picking Lillia top, if the enemy champions know you're in the top lane, they might pick something like an Aatrox, right, who loves playing against kind of rangy spellcasting champions, maybe gang playing Riven because she has so much gap closing potential and mobility. So there are difficult matchups, so do be a little bit careful blind picking her, but certainly a champion you can have in your champion pool. Now another top laner you can have in your champion pool, this is Rengar. And the great thing about Rengar, a bit like Lillia, is that lots of people will think you're going in the jungle, and people will be like, oh, what the hell, it's a Rengar in the top lane or Lillia top lane, and they'll actually counter pick themselves. And one of the great things about Rengar in the top lane is you have so many build options, but this one here, I mean, it's the most toxic build of all time, but it is probably the best. So what you do if you're against an attack damage champion anyway, is getting steel caps early on. This gives you a lot of trading power because you have Conqueror, right? And because you should be able to stack this easily with your ferocity, very rarely are you actually going to lose that in that 1v1. But after steel caps, it's very important to get a Blade of the Rune King and then Sunfire Aegis. It's like that Master Yi build that was being abused. It's still really good on other champions. Rengar just happens to be one of them. The Bork and Sunfire Aegis, I mean, Bork is just amazing for shredding tanks, right, with lots of HP. And in the top lane, every champion is going to be building HP at some point, and Sunfire Aegis just gives you so much sustain and almost damage soak ability. You can just cop so many cooldowns onto yourself and bait a lot of champions while your teammates clean up. Just as far as your secondary tree and your rune page, guys, make sure you're taking resolve with either bone plating or second wind depending on the matchup. So if you're against a champion who relies on, let's say, burst damage and short trades, bone plating is the one. But if you're against a poke based champion, especially a ranged champion, second wind is your best bet, and make sure you're taking revitalize full stop. This is going to empower your W's heal and will just enhance your survivability, which is what this build is all about. So Rengar in the top lane, the third champion, you guys should definitely think about putting in your champion pool. Now the final champion to think about playing in the top lane, if you don't want to play Lillia, but you do want to play an AP champion, then Rumble is certainly one of the most low-key broken champions for patch 12.18 and also for the rest of 12.17. So the reason Rumble is so good is because lots of stuff he actually uses has been buffed. So if we think about Night Harvester, right, a few patches ago getting buffed. If we think about Scorch getting buffed as well. Now I know this page doesn't actually have Scorch on it, but you can definitely take this, especially if the enemy champion has a lot of power in the early game, because Scorch will give you a better chance to actually win that laning phase. But let's just say you're against maybe like a tank champion like an Ornn or something. You just know you're going to scale for free, then taking Gathering Storm is actually a very wise decision and almost cheeky in a way, but definitely the best option. And as far as your secondary tree goes, again, it really just depends on the matchup, guys. So you could be against maybe something like a Darius, right? Bone plating is probably going to be a must-have, or maybe against a Riven or a Camille. But again, let's just say you're in a really free matchup, maybe against a tanky champion, then you can easily get away with taking something like Cheap Shot, which remember will work off your Electro Harpoon and your Equalizer Slow, and then Eyeball Collection because it's so easy to stack. You could also change Eyeball Collection for maybe something like Ultimate Hunter to get more equalizers off. That will really help you to snowball out of the early game, which is what Rumble is about. So if you want to dominate in the first 10-15 minutes of a game, Rumble is a great champion to pick, and not many people actually know how to play against him, and they might not even think you're playing in the top lane. So again, like the other top laners, it's a little hard to read where they might actually go in champ select, so that's also an inherent advantage these champions have. Now moving to the mid lane, guys, we've got two champions here to talk about, and the first one is like the best anti-assassin, maybe anti-Yasuo and Yone champion in the game. So I know Renekton has picked a lot, right, into stuff like Yasuo and Yone, but another champion who, well, to be honest, is even better because he's just stronger than Renekton at the moment, this is Sett. And because of the buffs last patch, so your Face Breaker having a 70% slow now, not a 50%, it makes it so deadly, especially if your jungler is going to play around the mid lane. The enemy Katarina, Yasuo, Yone, they can't play the game. The threat of you flashing into like an Elise cocoon, or it doesn't even matter who your jungler is, right? That is probably going to result in a kill. So mid lane is just GG if you get one of these matchups. So like I was saying for Lillia top lane, a little risky to maybe blind pick Sett mid because certain matchups are going to be difficult, especially those ranged champions, maybe something like Syndra or Zoe. You can never really touch them, right? And you're probably going to have to blow your flash. And after that happens, you've got no chance of actually gap closing that space. And an interesting build option here, as you guys can see, is to actually go Frostfire Gauntlet into Titanic Hydra. So the reason this combination is kind of broken is because Frostfire, right, the HP passive, because it's giving you the most HP from the tank mythics through the mythic passive, this synergizes really nicely with Titanic Hydra's passive. So the bonus HP you have, this gets converted into attack damage. And remember, your W now has more attack damage in it because of the buffs from last patch. So Sett is just in a really good position, not just in terms of like innate strength, but also build options. You can still go for stuff like Stride Breaker, maybe even Gore Drinker if the enemy team, like I said for Grades, has a lot of melee champions. So you can really choose whatever you need depending on the enemy team composition. But Sett in the mid lane, unreal champion to have in your champion pool, so think about picking him in 12-18. Now moving on, talking about one of those champions who Sett would really not appreciate playing against, this is Zoe. And these stats are in Challenger across the world to have close to a 54% win rate in over 850 games. That speaks volumes to how broken this champion is. Now I understand that in pro play Zoe isn't picked as much because the meta is kind of changing, right? It's no longer about just picking out a target and blowing them to bits. It's more about sustained damage. So if we think about champions like Zeri, for example, if we think about Azira in the mid lane, or even Sylas, who can last really long in team fights, as Zoe, you're very skill shot based, and you're probably only going to get off 1 or 2 Sleepy Trouble bubbles, and if you miss them, you're just useless. But in solo queue, because so many mistakes are going to be made by the enemy champions, and the synergy, the coordination of the teams, it's not really going to be there, Zoe still thrives, and will continue to thrive because she is such a strong champion. If we think about the E buff as well a couple of patches ago, this enhances your one-shot potential, and by going something like Sorcerer Shoes into Luden's Tempest, Shadow Flame, the magic penetration, it is off chops, and you will be one-shotting anyone on the Rift. Even if they have magic resist Hex Drinkers, they will die 100%. Just remember, guys, you're picking Zoe in the mid lane to have perma priority. You do not want to be CSing under your tower. You want to have all the pressure in the world, so keep that in mind when you're playing Zoe. So Zoe is the other mid laner to think about. Now, what about in terms of the jungle? Well, there's actually one mid laner in the jungle I think you guys should start playing, this being Zed. Now, I know Zed in the mid lane is overrated, if anything. So how can he be underrated in the jungle? Well, for the most part, Zed is a C-tier jungler. Across the majority of elos, right, people just don't know how to play this champion well enough to make him work in the jungle. So the thing I want you guys to do is to take 2 adaptive force in your minor runes. I know the page here recommends 1 attack speed shard, but trust me, 2 adaptive force, you don't need the attack speed. And as far as the domination tree goes, I know it's recommending ultimate hunter here, and you certainly can do this. I actually think it's really nice. Having a low cooldown on your death mark, because it is quite high, allows you to actually punish enemy champions who are making mistakes. But you can also opt for eyeball collection. But either one of these, eyeball or ultimate hunter, they work so well with sudden impact, especially because sudden impact got buffed, right? The extra lethality you get during the course of a game, you will deal a ton of damage with this rune. And of course, we have to mention here, guys, that the buffs to Zed, so the energy cost of your E going down by 10, this just accelerates your clear speed, right? And on Zed, full clearing is so powerful because you can easily hit level 4 around the 3-minute mark, get to the first scuttle crab. So he's one of the best full clearers in the game. But if you don't want to play an attack damage jungler, well, how about picking Maokai in 12-18 in the jungle? And this jungler at the moment, okay, he's not doing doing too well, but because of the buffs to your Q's damage to monsters in 12-18, so those are the changes that are coming in, this is really going to help Mao jungle next patch. And you can see here that with this rune page in diamond and above across the world, Maokai actually has close to a 62% win rate. So phase rush is really effective because it's so easy to proc, and the movement speed allows you to kite the enemy champion's maybe retaliation. When you actually go in, right, that's when you're kind of vulnerable. And do keep in mind here, there's no aftershock, there's no real tankiness, so we do have to be a little bit careful. We are kind of squishy, so that's why phase rush with then celerity for more movement speed and water walking, very, very powerful. And yes, you can take mana flow band here, but honestly, Nimbus Cloak is probably going to be better, or if you're into a lot of magic damage, you can always take nullifying orb as well. Just be sure, guys, to start with your sapling toss and to throw some saplings in the red brush or the blue brush, wherever you're starting first, and try to stack them. You don't want all of them popping off straight away because the actual damage will just be wasted. You want one sapling going into it, then the next, then the one after that. So that's very important. But after that, make sure you max your Q and you should be good to go. As far as builds go, you can go Frostfire, you can even go something like Chem Tank for the movement speed. That will make your ganks some map pressure, I guess, just even better. Now moving down to the bot lane, guys, unfortunately, I've got no AD carries who are going to be underrated in 12-18. But as far as the support role goes, there will be a couple of underrated champions next patch. The first of these being Thresh, because Thresh in 12-18 is getting some, well, kind of sizable buffs. So your HP growth, so the amount of HP you're getting per level, this is increasing. This means that in the mid to late game, well, you'll just be harder to kill. Even during the laning phase, this will have some impact, so less deaths. But maybe the biggest buff of all is to your flay's damage. This is increasing by 30 at rank 5, so when you have 5 points in your flay, and even though it might only be increasing by 10 at rank 1, this is still significant, because it means when you flash flay, it means when you land a death sentence, that enemy champion who you actually latch onto, well, there's a lot higher chance of them dying because your base damage is increased. What's interesting here at the moment, you can see as far as the skill priority and order goes, people are actually putting 3 points in flay, then maxing W into Q. Now next patch, because you're getting so much damage from your flay at rank 5, you could definitely max this out by level 9, then max your dark passage, then your death sentence. So we'll have to see what 12-18 brings in store for Thresh. Just keep in mind, guys, that if you are playing Thresh into a double range matchup bot lane, take Glacial Augment. If you're into a lot of melee champions and a melee support, something like a Rel or an Alistar, Aftershock is also something you can do, but Thresh will certainly be an underrated support in 12-18, and if you want to master him, of course, he's one of the most difficult champions to play. Make sure you check out our Thresh guides on our website. Now the last support of the last champion on this countdown, guys, to think about playing in 12-18, this is Gragas in the support role, and I think Gragas is so good because he is an amazing flex champion, but in the support role as well, Gragas does so well into so many champions, and Gragas is also very versatile. It's not like you have to, I don't know, like just engage. You can think about peeling your AD carry, or maybe someone on your team who's fed. Of course you've got your body slam, of course you've got your explosive cast, but you can use these to stop certain champions from engaging. So think about an Alistar, for example, using his headbutt. Gragas just uses his body slam, and Alistar is completely nullified. Or if you think about an immobile support, maybe something like a Soraka or a Lulu. If you can land one body slam there, that champion is probably going to die. But take these picks, guys, into consideration for your champion pools for next patch. If you did enjoy the video, please remember to leave a like down below. Any questions or thoughts about the champions we've mentioned, leave them in the comment section. And until our next Season 12 video, this has been a... peace.